Hi, I'm Derri and I've read it before. This one is the lovely Evie, who we have previously met, and we're going to continue pretty much aimlessly rambling through Farseer because we can and we like it. We will try and stay very much on topic today because today our topic is Kettricken at the lovely Evie's request, and I'm always happy to talk about any element of Realm of the Eldlings. So, Evie, how's it going today?
It's fine. I have barely any caffeine in my system, so
Oh no.
We'll see how this goes.
And I'm on my second cup of tea for the day, so we should be doing okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start with just basically saying, what is it about Kettricken that stands out so clearly for you, that you've connected so strongly with her?
Yeah, so mind you, I should caveat this. I haven't read that much fantasy compared to a lot of other people, but of what I've read, she is one of the strongest female characters that I've ever read, with so much agency. But she's not like other girls type female character. She is strong but also feminine, which you can have non-feminine characters and still be
absolutely
strong female characters.
Yeah, we're not being exclusive in any way here.
Yeah. And I just Robin Hobb is incredible with all of her characters and all of her character work. And from the moment that I met Kettricken, I was like, I am in love with this character. She is fantastic. And she just makes an impact on you from the moment she's on the page. And then what she goes through is for me, it's very close to my heart. So I very much empathize with her arc in some ways. So because she's a born leader.
She is a born leader, you're right. And her upbringing in the mountain, I think, defines her in a way that we don't see in a lot of the other characters, in that selflessness, that generosity of spirit is it is very uniquely hers. She is probably one of the purest hearted people, Hobb writes. And we see very early on just how big of a heart she has when at the end of Assassin's Apprentice, she's able to find forgiveness as sacrifice, not as herself, as Kettricken. She obviously holds the pain of the death that's just happened, but as sacrifice to what she's promised to, she's able to see beyond that and go, no, of necessity for my people who she's claiming, I have to forgive this. I have to find it in me to let that go. And I think that defines her so clearly for the rest of her journey, that she can look beyond herself and sacrifice, as you say. And sacrifice is she identifies so strongly as that sacrifice. I mean, how did you see that playing out for her? How did you think that identified her in her actions and behaviors?
Yeah, I mean, like, excuse me. Like you said, how she was raised in the Mountain Kingdom is much like with anyone. How you're raised really shapes your morals, your ideals. Just as much as we don't want to be like our parents,
we are so like our parents.
Yeah, we are, and we're shaped by our parents, our society, our culture. And when we're introduced to Kettricken and to the Mountain Kingdom, it's so different from what you've seen in Buck that and the oh my god, my brain's not working.
The Duchies,
there you go. It's so different. It's not wildly different, but in the story it seems so different from what you've seen thus far that it's like, oh, what, they're all like they treat their servants with respect and kindness, and the leaders aren't like on a pedestal. I mean, they are on a pedestal, but in a way, but it's because of sacrifice, because it's like a dual a dual relationship. They're on a pedestal, but they are humbled in a way, because they are sacrificed for their people.
Yeah.
So it's not there's a power structure at play, but it's I don't know how to describe it. It's
I find it to be just
different,
beautifully balanced with the respect and the duty, their duty to sacrifice, to be available, to do what needs doing ultimately, regardless of cost to themselves. And the way that, as you say, they respect their servants because their servants are family. They're the related royalty in any other place. And that respect and balance of duty and responsibility to how loved they are. Their people appreciate that whatever is asked of them, they're going to try and do. And you're right, we don't see that in the Duchies, and we don't see it in Buck. And I have read a lot of fantasy, and it is an unusual society with that level of respect for their, rulers, even though they're not called their king, they're called sacrifice. So, and I think that the connection that she forges with Verity, once they both understand that we actually both are doing this for not ourselves. We both have the people at large at heart here. Those are the people we're trying to help. I think once they both realize that they are actually on the same page, that's when the power in that couple really starts to show. And the tragedy, the sacrifice, the heartbreaking shortness of time that they're given is made more powerful, I think, because of that. I mean, how did you feel that disconnect went when Kettricken and Verity were first together and they were seemingly both pulling in such different directions?
It's for me, it was pretty much they're pretty much the same people. So they are, what's the saying, like, you never want to partner with someone who's so much like yourself, or whatever. And they are very much so much like each other. And I think if from a narrative perspective, if they didn't have such a short amount of, if they had a longer period of time together, I don't think their relationship would have ended up the same or even played out the same way. By separating them, you as the reader not only get that sense of loss because of their relation, or how do I say this? You as the reader get the separation and you want to see more of them together, but also you as the reader and the characters, because they're not together, you get the sense of loss of the potential of the relationship, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's exactly how I feel. That potentiality is what you lose. And I thought that the playing off her willingness to do anything, being a risk to her at Buckkeep, and the powers that be sort of allocating fits to her to go, just stop her doing that. It's going to get taken advantage of.
So I the one thing that I don't want to say I struggled with, but Fitz's and Kettricken's relationship is genuinely beautiful. Like I felt, to ship people.
Oh, I totally ship them.
I wanted them to be together because Kettricken brings out the best in everybody, but especially in Fitz. And he realizes that their relationship is so good. Like it's so good for him, and it's good. Your video went out again.
Ouch. There we go.
There we go.
Yay.
And he is good for her in that, you know, she's still able to challenge the buckkeep and duchy traditions by, I remember vividly her going out to ride.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to take anyone. And he convinces her to, if I recall correctly, he convinces her, well, at least have some sort of guard. And that's when the Queen's Guard is created. And I, you know, and at that point, Fitz is starting to get his agency at the same time, and some sort of like decision, not necessarily power, but able to make decisions in his life, even if it's for somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, when she is caught out and she, because she has gone on this ride, it's actually quite a delicious little situation, because she goes out several times on her own. She wants to visit Verity at the shipyards. She goes, and Fitz stops her and he's like, you can't be doing this. He doesn't want you there. This isn't going to go well. And he hates the fact that in saying that to her, he's just kind of broken her heart a little bit. So she's really sad and downcast. And then she goes out again. This time she's gone hunting with Regal because she's lonely. Regal, of course, is an ass and deliberately leaves her out in the snow. Unbeknownst to anyone, there are forged ones around. She's under attack by the time Fitz goes out to look for her. And having been attacked, everybody then goes, oh, maybe we should guard her. Fitz, could you organise that for us? We're happy to do it, but someone has to give us the okay. So for Fitz to do that for her gives her agency, while, as you say, it allows Fitz that moment to realise he does have some clout and he does know the right people and he does have that agency to put things in motion, which, given his role in the series, is delightfully ironic. So that freedom that they both kind of gain from that, I think, is quite magical. The other thing that comes...
Oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to say, so if I recall correctly, my memory is terrible. When Fitz and Kettricken meet, he doesn't realize she is who she is.
No.
Is that right?
No. So, and he sees she and Rurisk on next to who he knows as the king of the Mountain Kingdom king. And he assumes they're bodyguards because they're young and they're strong, but they're not ornately decorated in any way. They don't have jewelry. They're not gaudy. There's no fancy fabric. And that's when he discovers that the maid he thinks has been assigned to him is actually the sister of the king, because she describes the two young people as her niece and nephew. Later on in the event, the king refers to his children, and Fitz is like, oh, I've been talking to the... Okay. Going back over his thoughts. Have I let drop any secrets I shouldn't have? And so the ordinariness of Kettricken, as far as social structure is concerned, is his first impression of her.
Yeah, there are no barriers. Yeah. I think that's what I was trying to get at, is when they meet, there are no barriers. And I mean, I feel like there are no barriers for Kettricken with anyone. She has to learn those boundaries and those barriers when she gets to Buckkeep. And I think that is a struggle for her. And kind of going back to your original question of, you know, why and how I connected with Kettricken is, you know, I moved up, you know, 1,000 miles away from home, Ooh. No family, and I knew nobody, and I was on my own, and it's a scary thing to do. I mean, not to, sorry if you heard my cat, and not to toot my own horn or anything like that, but it is a brave thing to do, because it's, you know, there's no safety net, and it's but it's also scary, and you know, 10 years later that I'm still here,
Yay.
still living in the same place. Now have a husband, woohoo. But yeah, and it's just making the best of the situations that you are given,
Mhm.
and that Kettricken does it as sacrifice, but as herself as well. It's
Yeah.
a really beautiful thing. And we can talk spoilers, right? Of like
We can totally talk spoilers.
well, I know we're in like talking about Assassin's Apprentice. We can talk about Assassin's Quest spoilers, right? We're just okay, cool. And to I know this is going on the internet. I don't care at this point. So the scene when she reunites with Verity in
And the
not
quarry.
yeah, at the quarry.
Yeah.
And she tells him that she lost their child.
Oh, that broke my heart so much. And it breaks my heart every time I read it. I'm in tears.
I bawled every single time.
Because you're not only feeling
every single time.
But there's so much happening in that moment.
Yeah.
So
and
much.
Then the fact on top of that she named the child sacrifice.
That's right. It does very much get to the heart of who she is and where her heart is always, and the devastation that she feels at finally being able to tell her husband about the fact that she feels she's failed him in not being able to carry their child successfully. And for him to have given so much already at that point to the dragon that he seems to have no reaction to her makes it that much harder to read, because you know that she needs that feedback from him. She needs him to be upset with her, and he no longer has the ability.
Well, I don't even think it's upset with her. It's she's grieving, and she needs him. She
not like at her,
him, but I think
together.
I think she genuinely wants him. She needs someone to grieve with.
Yes.
To really kind of, and who better to do that with than
the husband, the father of the child that was lost. Yeah. And that double heartbreak for her in that moment, I just weep every time. It's devastating, because she has held this within herself for almost a year at this point. And the recognition that Fitz has in that moment of how much pain she's been in and has held together, because she still sees herself as sacrifice. She still has to keep going. She still has to be the queen and be able to keep going and be able to keep moving forward. That pain, that devastation is just heartbreaking. Yeah. I do want to come back to when just after the Queen's Guard was formed, after the attack that the Forged Ones attacked her, and she realizes what the Forged Ones are, and they organize a hunt for the next day, and everyone's like, yes, we're going to get them, they're awful people, and we're going to go out and kill them, and it's going to be great. And she immediately shuts that down, immediately says, no, these are our people. We're freeing them. This is a kindness that we're doing. And she changes that mood instantly. And Verity sort of looks on in awe. Like, I would never have I didn't know this was going to happen. She knew this was going to happen. She was ready for this to happen. I didn't see it coming. Wow, she's something. Shade is over the moon. Shade's like, oh, she's fantastic. This is awesome. How can I use this? This is brilliant, because he's Shade. And we get the only moment ever that we see Verity and Regal really butt heads, because Regal's horrified. He's like, stop her doing this. She's undermining our authority. And everyone manages to look away in time so as not to see Verity belt Regal, which I thought was marvelous. But it was because he saw the value in what his wife was doing, and his brother didn't have the right to take that away from her. The power in that moment for her was beautiful.
Yeah, it incredible. It's again, going back to how she was raised, and the values that she had and the morals that she grew up with. And excuse me, oh, I'm so sorry.
Right.
Gotta bring some levity to stuff.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so like it's I don't even think of it as Verity seeing her value. It's very like she's shifting mindsets. She's shifting, slowly culture, because to not spoil anything after, but what she's doing has an impact on the society around her, because she's having an impact on Verity. She's having an impact on the guards and the people, in her circle that will subsequently have impact on the society around them.
Yeah.
And it's, it brings them back to, even though she's already adopted, the Buck Duchy people as her own by saying, these are our people.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, she's reminding the people around her, the Duchy's people, the Buck people, that these are your people as well.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do about that?
You turned your backs on these people, and you really shouldn't have done that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's almost a shaming that she's doing by reminding them that you're really going to do this to your own people. And then
they're victims, they're not villains. And
right, exactly.
You've labeled them villains.
After that, right after the kind of getting the forged people, and when she cleans their bodies. Yeah. I was raised Southern Baptist, so like, Judeo-Christian, like ideals and imagery of washing someone's feet or washing somebody else. That's another form of incredible sacrifice.
Yes.
And very much an intimacy. And with her, that scene of her in the huge warehouse type thing where they have all the bodies laid out, and she's just seeing her washing the dead bodies. One of the most beautiful things that I've ever read.
Yes.
It's
a profound thing to read, because it's difficult to express. And it's Hobb. She's a genius. She knows those hooks that exist in your heart, and she's like, I'm going to get you with this one. And she does. And so you feel that pull on your heart, and it's difficult to express. It's societal, it's cultural, it's religious. It's the sense of that ultimate respect of the person who inhabited this body, that we will care for this body, we will look after, we will treat it with dignity and give it as much dignity and grace as we can. And there's a gentleness to that brings its own power, that it isn't weak to be gentle. It isn't weak to be kind. And we can show that in front of everybody. It's not something to be ashamed of, that we care for these people. And the mood around her becomes so respectful. Like they try and identify as many people as possible. The people who can't be identified, they record what they looked like. They record anything that could be recognized by somebody else. Come forward if you've lost someone. We may have found them and put them to rest. And then for Verity to follow behind doing this, going, we are going to treat these people as we would treat any of our lost. We will recompense the families for their loss. We will do what we can as the ruling family. And all of those things are things that hadn't been happening to that point. A lot of people had been killed as forged ones at that point, and never had they been given the respect as individuals that Kettricken gives them. And that shift in the way the Crown deals with it is, as you say, it's a massive directional shift for the entire culture, driven purely by this one woman who goes, no, these are our people. So yeah,
and to
profound.
shift the focus away from Kettricken for a moment. The scene where she's washing all the dead bodies, that's echoed with Patience and Fitz.
Yes, it is.
And again, the pure unadulterated selflessness of that act
Yes.
is it's just gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. I mean, Patience is my favorite character if you take out the main people in Realm with the Elderlings, because Patience, every single thing that she does from the moment we meet her is not to her benefit. Nothing she does helps her at all on any level. The only reason she is there is from her limited perspective. Fitz needs her. It's the only reason she's there. Everything she does further ostracizes her from the court because she wants that connection to Fitz and she wants to make things better for Fitz. So even before she came to court, she was considered a bit odd and she's maybe a bit touched. And she just deepens that width between herself and everybody around her with everything she does, even to the point where he's been labeled a traitor. He's been labeled a beast magic worker when he's killed. And she still goes, I don't care. I'm going to look after his body. I'm going to treat his body with respect. And I just love her so much.
I think you know, Kettricken and Patience are really good, not necessarily even foils, but they're just mirrors of each other. And it's interesting to see Kettricken as what Patience could have been.
Absolutely.
And seeing Patience as what Kettricken could be. They're both doing the same thing. They're very firm in their morals and their decisions. Where Patience is seen as, you know, eccentric and you know, whatever. And it's just, oh God, Hobb is a genius.
Yes, because she can draw those comparisons between women who are actually fundamentally different. Kettricken is very solid, isn't quite the word I want, but there's a serenity to Kettricken that Patience doesn't have. Patience is searching always for something. Kettricken has found that.
Yeah, and I feel like Kettricken is very self-assured.
Yes.
And again, going back to how she was raised, she knows her place, whereas Patience, she had this role that she was supposed to play, and then everything kind of Fitz came into the picture.
But even then, she
threw things off.
The crown didn't want the king didn't want chivalry to marry Patience. It went against everybody's wishes for him. He had to fight to be allowed to marry her. So she's considered odd as a child. She's considered flighty as a teenager. The prince falls in love with her. Now she's the queen in waiting. Nobody wants her to be. At no point in her life was she ever accepted for herself, where Kettricken has not only grown up in a place that values individuality, but has allowed her to grow into that womanhood with that sense of self. And that, I think, is Hobb saying, look at these two women. The similarities between them are so great, and yet look at how differently they have turned out, because actions have consequences. Everything that happened to those women as children, this is how they are as adults. And those are secondary characters.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I think the other, I mean, she does this in all of her characters, but especially in Kettricken and Patience, there is this mirror, there is this juxtaposition, but she doesn't portray either one as the better option or worse off. They just are. Patience, her path and what she does and her decisions are wonderful and valid and good for her and those around her, as are the decisions that Kettricken makes.
Yes.
Like there is no wrong path for womanhood. And I think it's, I mean, oh God, this is what I love about Robin Hobb's writing and her storytelling, is
Yes.
that there is so much that is between those lines that you may or may not be able to describe adequately with words, but it's just the feeling that is just so beautifully captured in these stories and in these characters. And oh, Robin Hobb.
And I want to bring in, if we're talking about the just amazing way that Hobb has of bringing us these characters as fully formed three-dimensional characters, even as secondary, tertiary extras in the story. If we bring Molly into that as well, you have a young woman who we saw her being abused as a child. We saw that relationship with her father as her father degraded through his drinking, and how that affected her mentally. And we see that in her relationship with Fitz. And we see it when she finally goes and into possibly the most controversial relationship I've ever talked to anybody about, is when she turns around and she ends up forming a relationship with Boric. But you can see all of the reasons for all of those choices. And all of them feel natural, and all of them are within that character's sphere. You've got another capable woman. Molly knows a trade. She knows her beekeeping. Fitz has taught her to read, or it continues to teach her to read. So she's skilled. She has knowledge. She's appreciated for those things. She's given credit for those things. And yet she also desperately just wants to be a mother and a wife. But not knowing how to do that, because she never had that around her as a child. So the awareness that Hobb has of how childhood trauma affects who you become as an adult carries through in all of her characters at every level. And it is mind-boggling, because we see it in Patience, we see it in Kettricken. And it's not something that has had to be explicitly stated. It's not something that's ever explained. It's suddenly, if you go, that makes sense when you consider that happened to her when she was a teenager. That happened to her when she was a child. Totally informs all of their decision making. And I think it's something a lot of authors don't factor into their character building, which I think is why Hobb shines in that.
Let alone female characters.
I know. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, fantasy particularly is often so trope riddled, but trope's not done well. It's the not like other girls. It's, yeah. That we get so many in even just Farseer. We haven't even branched out into the rest of the series yet. Just in the characters you meet in Farseer, all of them are fully formed, women as well. And I think that's why a lot of women really do identify with Hobb as a reader, because her women are real people, you know, and they come across on the page as beautifully formed people. So I think it's amazing.
My cat is going freaking nuts. I swear she hasn't had catnip.
I was going to say, is there some catnip hidden in the shelves?
Nope.
Yay.
But yeah, so yeah, it's this there is I would like to think that there is a very heavy, bold, wide line between objectification and the agentification. I don't know, the agency. But however, I think it is actually a pretty fine line. Like it is.
Often it's almost undefinable. It's like,
yeah, it's very easy to fall into, well, I mean, tropes and like very surface level characterizations of not just women and female characters, but any characters. And again, going, you know, Robin Hobb, like you said, makes these fully formed, like flesh They feel like flesh and blood characters, every single one of them. And you're reading a story that is first person perspective from a character that has a very, I don't want to say warped sense, but he has a very particular view about the world and those around him.
And he's a teenage boy.
Yeah, but that
like, how much attention is he paying?
Yeah,
and yet she's still able to do that.
Yeah, and his perceptions of people are also, skewed. Yeah, so that even through all that, she's still able to have these fully formed complex characters and complex women. And going back, making it about Kettricken. I keep wanting to say it, Kettricken.
You're allowed.
Yeah, whatever. It's fantasy, right?
Yeah.
It's truly incredible. And that we have this character that is, I wanted to see more of her, but I could see why, obviously because of the perspective, we couldn't spend as much time as we could with her, but I wanted to see more of her. And I always get so excited to see her on the page, because I know that, she's not a perfect character. We're talking about how amazing this character is.
Yeah.
I also know she's not perfect. She is flawed to some degree. I couldn't give you examples because I'm trying to think. I'm thinking, colored glasses on. Let's be honest. But if I hope that makes sense. But like, I could understand. Like, she's so fully formed that I can see her being flawed and not being absolutely perfect.
Yes. So I'm going to agree. And again, I'm sitting here thinking, I can't think of an instance where she does anything wrong. But again, we only see her for those small moments in time through fits. So there's obviously large chunks of her life we don't see where she may be making mistakes. And yet, even as a character where I can't think of a mistake that she made, or even anything that could be even sort of kind of inferred to maybe be wrong, she doesn't read like a Mary Sue. She reads like just a really good person who is always doing her best. And that's pretty mind-blowing, really. How easy would that be to have got wrong and have her come across as that Mary Sue, as someone who comes in from another country and suddenly everything's, got golden light shining on it and everything's wonderful. No.
Yeah. She could be seen. Yeah. It's really interesting. So as sacrifice in her world, it would have been easy to turn her into that savior trope.
Yeah.
Sacrifice equating to savior.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to sacrifice. Yes. And it's just so good. And she learns from the society, like the Duchy society. It's not like, oh, like Mountain Kingdom society is so much better, I'm gonna make this all, great. Yeah. She learns about the duchies and the culture in the society, and she's like, well, how do I incorporate this into my life?
Yes. And
how can I feed what I've learned into this society by making, the best of the situation and hopefully improving everything. So
we see it when she takes Juxtaposition up to the Queen's Tower. He's come for angry words with the king because nobody came to his assistance. His duchy's been attacked. They've sent messages. They've alerted everybody they're supposed to alert, and nobody came. No support came. No soldiers, no ships, nothing. So he's shown up really angry, and the king is too ill to see him. So he's getting more and more offended. Regal, of course, thinks this is marvelous. This is what he's after. Kettricken goes, okay, I can't do this as the queen in waiting, but I can do this as Kettricken if I do this away from the centre of power. And these are things that she's learnt since coming to Buckkeep, because had she been in the mountains in a similar situation, it wouldn't have mattered. She would just have gone, okay, fix it, done. But she's learnt that political balance is something that she has to be aware of. So she does take him to the Queen's Tower to show him, I'm not the queen yet, but I will be. And from me, here are some funds, because I can't help you from my position within royalty, within Buck, but I can help you as Kettricken, an individual who happens to live in Buck and will one day be queen. And
she
the
gives him,
nuance of that is,
and stuff,
yeah,
right?
she gives him jewelry because those are hers to give. They're not part of the crown's wealth. They are hers. They belong to Kettricken, not the queen in waiting. And so the nuance in that she got right, like she really got that right. The political interplay there, she was really aware of. And I think that she played that. The fact that I say she played that is enough to say she's learned the politics of buttkeep. She's known she has to play it exactly right. And
but at the same time, at least for me, it seemed genuine. It didn't seem something
was genuine.
that was political. Yeah. And then on top, like, I think if I recall correctly, the jewels were given to her by Verity.
Yes.
So that she is willing,
they were part of her wedding gift,
sacrifice this connection with Verity for the betterment of even, part of the duchies. Is another example of her sacrifice, and the way that she leads, and just her connection with people, as a person, as Kettricken. And it's just,
and this is the beauty of her as a character. She has that purity. She knew what needed to happen. She knew what she wanted to do about it, but had also learnt enough political savvy to know she can't just do it. She has to do it in such a way that the people involved know what's being said without anybody actually having to say it. And she just treads that line beautifully for somebody who hasn't grown up in Buck, who's had to actually learn how those balances work, and which speaks to her just intelligence, that she's gone, oh, okay, that's not going to fly. I have to do it this way. And yet still be genuine in her intent and what she achieves. And Shemshi, as the Duke, recognises that and accords her the level of respect that is worth. He recognises that this is a gesture that she's had to go quite a way out of her comfort zone to make. He knows that this is part of her wedding gift. He knows this is coming from her personally. And so the connection she forms with Duke Shemshi there scares the crap out of Regal, because he doesn't know how to form those relationships. But those are the strengths that Kettricken is going to go on with, where she does treat Shemshi and Shokes, everybody, with that level of respect. That come to me with your issues and we can work it out.
Yeah,
and they trust that she will.
Yeah, and I think that's the defining, well, not defining, but one of the biggest differences between Kettricken and Mountain Kingdom versus Regal, Verity, and the duchies. Verity kind of learns Mountain Kingdom ways of his time there, and with Kettricken, but it's this, she empathizes with others' plights as a individual, and she uses that as part of her leadership. Regal doesn't do that. He just thinks of himself as we all know. And it's by empathizing, you, like you said, you get that respect. You can't just expect respect. That's just obedience. Without empathy, respect is just obedience.
That's right. And with that doesn't come any kind of
loyalty.
Well, that's right, loyalty. And she does win the duchy's loyalty, which is borne out later in the trilogy. We see that loyalty really come to save everybody, really. She's, what's the word I'm looking, capable. There's a capableness about Kettricken that is reassuring to the people around her. despite the fact that she had to give him jewels on the top of a rain-swept tower, he knows that she's capable. He knows that he can trust what she says. He knows that if she fails to deliver, it's not because she didn't want to. And so that allowance for error, that allowance for mistakes is greater than if she had just been the queen who just gave him money and said, yeah, I'll help you later. There's an intimacy in the relationship that isn't there if you don't have that, empathetic connection with somebody. And just sublime. It's beautiful to read. Like, it's beautiful to read.
Yeah.
So yes, it's just to die for. So okay.
All right, I just thought of a name for our series: Fangirls.
Oh, totally fangirls. Totally fangirls. Done. We're going to fangirl regularly. It's all good. Because it's true. I mean, there are moments that even with a large vocabulary, I cannot think of words to describe it. There is a richness in the characters and a complexity to them that she can achieve in first person from a teenage boy. Okay. Don't know quite how she does that, but okay.
Yeah, and the way that, that she explores the such nuanced things that, I feel like the English language doesn't have even words for. So it's she just taps into these very just almost primal, but still like universal / spiritual universal things. I don't know.
They're very at the heart of relationships. I mean, I think about this and you think, because we can see these secondary, tertiary characters and their relationships with other secondary, tertiary characters through Fitz, you'd think that would just be a cast of extras. It's not. We know Patience and her maidservant Lacey, and we know how close that connection is because Fitz watches them interact. And even with a few words on a page, she's able to convey the level of care that there is between those two women. And that's insane, that we can watch Kettricken form bonds with the women in the court through Fitz and how those relationships develop. It's easier, obviously, with the men around Fitz because he spends more time with the men around him. But again, and I've said this to somebody in a previous conversation who was complaining about the lack of women in Farseer, my point was that's a choice. That's a writing choice to not have women in his life because it's Fitz's story. And for the story to go where the author wants it to go, that lack of women in his life as a child has repercussions throughout the rest of the series in how he interacts with women from then on. Because of the way she writes characters, she has to build that in to make it believable.
Well, I mean, I would also, this is going a little bit off topic, but I would actually counter that, counter the perception that there are lack of female characters by saying there's actually probably I would say an almost equal amount of male characters. Like substantial named male characters.
Yes.
It's just them on the page though. Like you said, Fitz spends more time with the male characters, with Burrick and Verity and Shade, and Regal.
Sadly.
Yeah. Which actually, looking back on it, you don't really see Regal on the page that much.
No, you
don't. But when you do, it's so impactful that it's like, I hate this son of a bitch.
Yeah.
I can cuss, right?
And I think it's why Regal sort of comes across a little bit mustache twirly, because unless you're looking for it, there isn't a reason for him to be the bad guy. But we only see him from Fitz's perspective. It's only when you sort of gather up the inferences and catch things that are dribbled through the series that you can see actually Regal has some reasons for this. He believes that Fitz has conspired, or at least conspired, if not been the hand that killed his mother. You know, he believes that. He believes that Fitz is out to get him, because from Regal's perspective, he is. So when you pick up all of the little nuggets, he has reasons. Yeah. But from Fitz's perspective, this guy just hates me. And okay, what can I do about it? Nothing.
Yeah.
So he does come across as that two-dimensional villain. And on a first read, that might be all you get from Regal. I've had a few more. There's more there than you realize. There is depth to him if you look for it, but you have to know to look for it. And I think in other authors you wouldn't.
Yeah, I will just say that as an example of Robin Hobb's character work and her just power, she gave a ferret an arc in literally 2 to 3 sentences total across the entire series.
Yeah.
And
if you've read Farseer, you know who we're talking about. That has stuck with you because it was so cleverly done. But with Regal, she gives you a moment when Fitz in in Assassin's Quest, where he goes to Tradeford and he sees where Regal grows up. And you see Fitz have this realization that if you grew up here, Buckkeep will have been a horrible place to go, to have been forced to go to. And again, you get a light shone on Regal. He's not even on page.
Yeah.
And the deft touch that she uses to put that sort of thing throughout the series that gives you those insights without drawing your attention to it. Fitz is being marveled. He's like, wow, this place is amazing. And so within that context, that thought doesn't seem out of place. Yeah. But when you pick it out of that paragraph and go, that's an unusual thing to think, it's there deliberately to put you in mind of Regal, to make you think about the fact that Regal was a young boy who was pulled away from this fabulous place every year to go and spend the worst winter at Buckkeep. You know, it's the worst time of year to be there. It's cold, it's raining, it's stormy, it's bleak, it's drafty, it's not pleasant.
And so juxtaposing that against Kettricken, you know, she's also taken out of her home, everything she's known, and she makes the absolute best of it. It's like one of those classic examples of how you look at a glass. Is it half empty or half full?
Yeah.
And it's so good.
It is good because she's able to do it without making you feel like that's what she's doing.
Yeah.
Because it's so obvious in so many stories that that's what an author is doing, showing you that, you just got to look at it differently. It's done with such a deft touch that only when you look back on it do you think, wow, okay, yeah, there is that. You could have gone either way. Yeah. You chose to go that way. You could have just as easily have gone the other. And again, the choices that you make.
Neither of these things are wrong, but it's the perceptions, it's the complexities, it's
everything
how
that went before
someone.
Yeah.
And it's just
but she shows you what happened before.
So good.
But it is because she shows you what happened before. So when the moment of decision arrives and they do make that choice, you know why they made that choice, because that's the choice of course they were going to make. That's what happened before. That's what they're going to do now. Not every author, very few authors can do that believably. That's something that I read in reviews, I hear in reviews. That only happened because the author wanted it to. I mean, you can say that about everything that happens in any book ever.
Yeah.
But when it's a character choice, it can feel out of the blue. You're like, why would they do that? That was stupid. In Robin Hobb's case, they can make a stupid decision and you can be going, oh my God, you're so stupid. But you know why they made the decision. Yeah. Fitz makes so many dumb decisions. I love Fitz. He's an idiot. He makes so many bad decisions, but you know why he's making them. You follow his logic. You're like, yeah, I see why you're doing it. You're wrong. You're a dork, but I see why you're doing it. And it could so easily have come across poorly. So easily.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna try and put this into words and make it make sense, but it's probably just gonna make sense in my head.
That's okay.
But Robin Hobb to me is like a puppeteer, but working with puppets without strings. Like you forget strings are even there. Yes. And the puppets feel so real that you know that there's a puppeteer working, but you don't see, the connection between the puppet and the puppeteer, the characters and the author. It's just so.
I did follow that, because there are stories that you read that you're very aware that somebody has written a story. Robin Hobb has created a world and dropped you in it. There's never a sense that I'm reading a story. It's very there's a word, but
immersive.
Yes, it's very immersive. She just drops you in it. I can tell you what the Buckheap entranceway looks like. I can tell you that the stone stairs are on my right. I can tell you that they go this way and they go across, and that's the hallway over there, because I've been there. I've been there and I've looked and I've been surrounded by the castle. I know what noises I can hear. I know where the drafts are, not because she wrote it that specifically, but because she just dropped me into a world that felt real.
And so that's actually, I think I finally am able to put into words to explain how I like to read and how I like to experience stories. So a lot of people talk about being visual readers. I'm not a visual reader. What Robin Hobb is able to do through her prose is I'm able to perceive everything from the physical world that she's built to the characters through a sensory experience. And I know that sounds a little odd because it's on a page and it's words. But I don't visualize. I should say 99% of the time I cannot visualize. But through effective prose, like Robin Hobb's, I'm able to perceive the world, feelings, emotions through all the senses of the world, and through the words on the page. And Robin Hobb does it so well. But going back to Kettricken, I think we talked about this a little bit, or maybe a lot of it, in our general discussion of the Farseer trilogy, but I really want to talk even more about the scene with Verity, Kettricken, and Fitz when Fitz and Verity switch bodies and in the quarry.
Yes.
And how that could impact Kettricken. Because I still am grappling over it. I know that we've talked about it before.
No, that's fine. I am actually going to ask you to put a pin in that, because I might invite Joanna to that discussion, because I know it's something that she wants to talk about. So we can do that, and we can invite Joanna to our Fangirls Club, and she can join us in another episode where we will look at that, because that's going to take some unraveling. So that's absolutely something we can look deeply at a different time. But
also, alternative title for our fangirls, or Fangirls of Robin Hobb, subtitle, Analyze a Scene.
Lose track completely of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay. No, because this is it. In that a scene a few paragraphs long deserves this sort of deeper dive to sort of unpick what it's going to mean for later events and the emotional connections that are going to be affected. Hobb's able to do that, as you said, with Little Ferret, with Small Ferret. It's 2 or 3 lines. And yet Small Ferret is just my hero. He's such an awesome character.
And I mean, and not even, so as much as I'm like, oh, I'm not a plot-driven reader, I genuinely am not. But like when plots are executed well, I don't even think about it.
No, that's
so
right.
That's why I say I'm not a plot-driven reader. But even in these moments, in these scenes, not only for how they impact later on, either in the same book or in the same series, but even on its own, in the moment, you feel so... The only thing I can think of is quicksand, but in a good way. Like you feel totally, I mean, immersed, like absorbed and overwhelmed in the best way by every single moment that you see. And for me, with Kettricken, because of the moments that you have with her that are so, for me, poignant, that's probably not the right word, but so there's just a personal connection that I have with all of the moments that I see with her, and it makes me love her even more.
Yeah.
If I hadn't have had those connections to her particular scenes, I think I still would have loved her, but because of that, even more so, I adore her. And
she shows Kettricken in some very simple ways just how much bonded to her is her need to be sacrificed, is her need to be helping, to her need to be useful. Quite late in Assassin's Quest, Fitz is really angry with Verity because he's not being allowed to help, and Verity pulls him up short and he says, "My queen is sweeping rock dust. Go and make a broom."
Yeah.
Kettricken's just done that for herself. She's gone, I can't help him with that. What can I do? And that's not something that's drawn attention to. Well, obviously it is because Verity mentions it, but watching Kettricken do that wasn't the point of that scene. It was simply going, she's doing what needs doing. Do what needs doing. Yeah. That's really all it takes.
And I think Kettricken is Kettricken / sacrifice, you know, it's just really, the idea of sacrifice can be perceived as I can give up something, but for the way that I've seen it and through Kettricken, it's not giving up something, it's actually establishing and forming a bond and connection with wherever you're at, with the situation you're in, the people you're with, and it's genius. Genius.
The way I see Kettricken's understanding of sacrifice is that it's a giving of herself, of what makes her who she is, whether it's her time or energy. It's not just her time or her energy she's giving you. She's giving of herself. She's like, no, I will do this wholeheartedly. I will do this with my effort. I will do this with what I have. Nothing I do is something I've ticked off a list. I've given this thought. You are having my 100% full attention in this moment, whether it's sweeping rock dust or cleansing the dead. I'm here in this moment and I'm giving this everything I've got. And so all of those moments have meaning for the people that she's sharing them with, because she's there, she's with them. And that sacrifice is something that she knows not everybody will do. Some people don't want to be in the moment while they're cleansing the dead because it's too emotional, it's too heartbreaking. She's going to give them her emotions and she's going to give them her heartbreak because it's needed. Somebody has to do this. Somebody has to be hit by this emotionally. I will take the hit. And she does that all the way through, where her own individual protective layers are never part of it. If she has to be there, she's there 100%. If that means she takes the emotional hit, she will take the emotional hit and be seen to take that emotional hit. She had to grieve for the entire duchy to grieve for those people. Seeing her grieve allowed everybody else to grieve. If she'd remained cold in that moment, nobody would have. It would have been a heartless thing. But she took an entire country's pain into herself in that moment. And I can't even imagine how she did that, but she did, and was able to encompass that. And the greatness to her spirit that takes it's almost beyond words as far as how much respect that deserves, because she did that. And that was profound to be able to do that. That's how I see Kettricken's sacrifice.
Yeah, and I think so, and I think that makes at least for me, that makes her grief and admission to Verity, or I should say her admission to Verity about losing their child, and her outward showing of that grief and just breaking down all that much more powerful, because she is the leader and she's also an individual. In the moment where she's dealing with the forged ones, I think of her in that moment as primarily grieving as a leader, and then secondary as Kettricken, as an individual. But with admitting to or telling Verity that she's lost their child, primarily, like, first, that's her Kettricken.
It's a very intimate grief.
Yeah. And it's
also a very female grief. And I think any woman who's failed to bear a live child feels that grief in themselves, with that unfair but often felt sense of guilt, of failure, that I can't even be a woman and do my genetic duty to the species. I'm a failure on all these levels. And the intimacy of sharing that grief and of needing to share the grief is part of what makes that moment so profoundly painful, because it's
and
her
I think
grief.
If we didn't have the scene, it's a really interesting. So if we didn't have the scene with the forged ones and her her cleansing the bodies, it wouldn't have made the other scene of her grief for the loss of her child that much. It wouldn't have made that as impactful. Been a different, but at the same time, like, it doesn't. The power of Hobb's writing is she makes all of the scenes stand on their own, but when together, looking, stepping back. If you're looking at it closely, wonderful, perfection. Amazing, like, fantastic. Impactful. Stepping back, you see, oh my God, like this. It just
forms this beautiful tapestry. And I often will compare Elderlings to a tapestry, because there are so many threads, and you can look at this little bit of the tapestry and it's really beautiful, and then you step back and you realize, oh, it's connected to this bit of the tapestry. Look back, oh, okay, it's actually this big, and it's all connected. All of those threads are amazing, and that she's able from the very beginning to give you that scene in Royal Assassin with the forged ones with Kettricken. That's a pivotal scene for the kingdom, for her relationship with Verity, for her relationship with the king, everything. Pivotal moment. On its own, that's a beautiful scene. When you step back and you see the greater tapestry image of the trilogy, you go, wow, you can see threads from that scene go all the way through into this moment that you get at the end, where you get that admission of that sense of failure as an individual that she feels, the sense that she's let him down, that I didn't do my duty as queen and give you an heir, but as a woman, I failed my husband.
Yeah.
And the difference, the intimacy of the grief is different. As the queen, she was able to take in all that grief and show her grief and express her grief for everybody. This moment that you get at the end is from her. She's not taking in grief, she's letting out grief. And that...
It's very cathartic.
And it's just so beautifully written because it feels real. You know, we've known women who have lost babies. We maybe have been women who have lost babies. That feeling is real. And to put it on the page beautifully and ask for their grief, to ask, please share my grief, understand my grief, acknowledge my grief that I went through on my own because you weren't here, is devastating to read. For her then to not get it back is just so powerful, because it is heartbreaking. And then you see Verity acknowledge that I wish I could give you more. Like, he knows logically that I need to be emotional right now, but he just doesn't have the capacity anymore. So that falls on Fitz is the one to give her the shoulder to cry on. And it's a really interesting bookend of their relationship, of Fitz's and Kettricken's, at least in Farseer. Yes.
Where, you know, they meet unassuming, like, I don't know if Kettricken realized who he was. I'm sure she did.
Yes,
but he doesn't
took
realize
him to the
who
gardens.
he is. Yeah. And it's just it's a really good arc of their relationship as well.
It is.
And it's really beautiful. What was I gonna say? I had a
think
thought
it is
before. I was
beautiful.
like,
That's all right. That's all right. But this is something Hobb can do, because she taps in again. She knows those hooks are in your heart, and she'll just hook onto them and go, oh, I'm going to pull on that one.
Yeah.
And she does. And I've said it before, I'm sure I'll say it again. Robin Hobb punches my heart, and she rips it out of my chest, and then, still holding my heart, punches me in the soul.
Yeah.
And I keep going back for more. We are masochists.
Masochists, yep. Oh, so, okay, I remembered my thought process. So, yes, tapestries.
Yes.
Cool. And there are implications.
Yes.
Alan, if you're watching this, you're not. But if you ever watch this,
he might be.
They're not the same type of implications, okay?
No.
And I feel like that's the difference, is that Robin Hobb, she builds things and like weaves everything together, but you aren't looking for those individual weaves. You're not looking where they lead. You're just relishing in the moments and in the artwork of the tapestry that you see. And then as you get further and further away from the tapestry, as in getting further and further on in the series, you're able to appreciate how those threads, you know, you can appreciate
just put there for later. They were important in the now.
Yeah.
When those things are happening, when those things begin, they are important in what's happening in that moment. They are necessary. They have not been put there to deal with later.
They're not just Easter eggs for, let's look for the little let's
look for clues.
Look for the
No, that's not it at all. What it is you read this beautiful story, and as I did when I finally finished it the first time. That's not true, because I've been rereading since before it ended. But because I did read the first 3 trilogies, because I began reading just before Fool's Fate came out. So I think I read the first 8 once, maybe twice, before Fool's Fate came out. So the first 3 trilogies, to then go back and read it, it wasn't so much finding Easter eggs as going, wow, the whole story was here from the very beginning.
You're
the whole story, not individual things. All of it has always been part of the whole story. You're just learning them as you go. But when
You're
you read
able
it
to
after
appreciate
learning,
it in a new way.
they're there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about finding a clue and going, oh, that was foreshadowing for that. No. As a whole.
You're able to appreciate it in a new way, in a more profound way, I think.
Yeah. It's a talent, that's for sure. It blows me away because I'm still finding things, you know, and which is why I have to really work hard with new readers to not assume that that's obvious. It's only obvious to me because I've actually read it and noticed all of these things that perhaps you don't notice on your first way through because you're too busy following this main line. But yeah, it's all there, and it's the richness of it just adds, because whatever you do grab on your way through the first time adds to that central thread that you are following. It's a main thing.
So one aspect we haven't really talked about is Kettricken and the Fool's relationship.
Yes.
I love Kettricken.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely adore the Fool.
Yes.
And, you know, they don't have a lot of interactions together, except at
Certainly
the
not
end
that we see.
when they're fleeing. Yeah. And
it is a beautiful relationship in that
it's great.
We see the few times we see them together at Buck Keep, obviously they're through Fitz's eyes, and they're often high drama moments where they're all in the room together. And even in those fleeting moments that Fitz is able to see them together, he sees that the Fool respects Kettricken and Kettricken respects the Fool. And that's enough to go on with when you're watching them from afar. After the events at the end of Royal Assassin, and we don't see Kettricken and the Fool until sort of halfway through Assassin's Quest. In the interim, they've travelled together. They've saved each other from events. They mention them like friends do as asides. Like, no, you did that for me then. We never learn what he did. Yep. In that moment. We only know that he did something that Kettricken values. He says as much to Kettricken. We don't know what she's done for Fool, only that she has, that they've developed a genuine friendship in that time they spent together, and that respect just carries through, and we believe it because it's there on the page. They've clearly found a bond. They've clearly spent this time together. And because she's been back in the mountains for a little while, when Fitz does regain connection with them, you end up with her basically going, well, if you say you can do it, go. I trust you. I believe you. You know, I can't stop you. You want to join? Fine. Yep. You say you can do it? Okay. And that just as a respect that you know yourself, I'm not going to question it.
She treats him as an
individual.
Yeah, as a person.
Yeah, rather than an adjunct to the king or an adjunct to Fitz.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even as a creature. Like I feel like the Fool is seen as a creature because
that's how he's spoken of by so many characters.
Yeah.
I mean, the way Starling talks to him and about him.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to Kettricken's the empathy that she has, you know, ingrained in her as sacrifice.
Yes.
She empathizes with everyone from all walks of life, all abilities, everyone.
Because she's grown up in a place where everybody's skills, everybody's abilities are helpful, and you need to know what everybody can do. Because to build a community, to build a society, everybody needs to contribute. But it's always best if they get to contribute in the things that they enjoy doing and that they're good at doing. So if somebody tells you they can do something, you go, okay, great. Let's work that into how we're going to work. Whereas if you're in a city or a town or whatever size you want to call Buck, then yes, we still need everybody's gifts, but we can't just take what you've got. We need a smith. Can you do that? Maybe. Well, we're going to train you anyway, even if you don't like it. That's what we need. So there's that separation that you get in Buck that we see in Verity, where his people are his people, but not necessarily individuals. Kettricken looks at it as a combination of individuals. She sees it at that more granular level and connects with it.
Yeah, and another juxtaposition, I can't talk, is enabling versus enforcing. Kettricken enables, everybody else enforces.
Yes.
I mean, she does have to learn to enforce things, but I think, that's a last resort type situation.
And even then she does her best to do this with people who it will work for.
Yeah.
She doesn't ask people who are drastically unsuited to whatever she needs to have happen. I think my favorite moment of enabling is with Kettle at the end. They don't tell Kettle they're leaving the mountain, the Jampe. Kettle has said she wants to go. They didn't tell her they were going. And when she followed them, Kettricken's like, well, I'm not waiting. If you can keep up, great. That's not a problem. But we're not waiting. And that was how it went. Yeah. They would travel, and at the end of every night, Kettle would still be miles behind them. They didn't wait for her, but she'd catch up in the night. And they was like, okay, should the day come that she doesn't catch up, we're not going to wait. We're going to keep going the next day. But there was this enabling of the fact that Kettle is still her own woman. And if she says she can do this, then okay, do it. But if you fail, that's on you.
Yeah.
That allowance to make that mistake.
Yeah. Maybe really enabling is actually probably not the right word then, now that I'm thinking of it. It's the empowerment.
Oh, yes, that's the word. Yes, very much about empowering. And and it makes her a pleasure to read. Kettricken is welcome on the page. Like some characters, you're like, oh, I don't want to read about you. Kettricken, you want to read about because you want to spend time around her. You want to be in, again, it's so immersive. You want to be in her sphere. You want to be around her. She's such a weak word, but she's a good person. There is goodness in her and around her, and she's not, there's a word, but there's never a holier than thou sense to Kettricken, ever. You never feel that she's judging the people around her, despite the fact that she is such a good person. And she's always looking for the good in people, always. Even Regal. But, that's a strength I don't have. I will admit that freely right now. I don't have that in me. But yeah, she does. And that's admirable. I think she's a marvelous character. So marvelous. So
one of many that Robin Hobb has created.
Yes. It's on that because you're in Golden Fall now?
No, I finished Fool's Fate.
Oh, you have. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then I don't need to go. Oh, yeah. That was some beautiful moments. And we will talk about the Tawny Man trilogy at a later date because we're so doing this again. But I think we've probably tapped out on this one without it. Inviting
well,
Joanna.
at least this go around, I'm sure I'll think of more
there'll
stuff.
Be more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I will talk to Joanna and see if she'd like to join us and talk about that specific event and see where that leads us. And we'll keep that one for a later date. Is there anything else you can think of that you'd like to mention in this video?
Not really. I mean, we didn't really talk about Kettricken and her brother. I mean, just
we didn't, and we certainly have time if you do.
I mean,
Rurisk was I liked Rurisk. I thought he was a top bloke. We didn't get to see him for very long, obviously, just a few chapters at the end of Assassin's Apprentice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything for me profound to say, but it's she's actually similar to Verity in that regard, where Rurisk was supposed to be the leader, and then she has to step into this leadership role that, you know, she was not born for. She wasn't supposed to be, because Rurik was supposed to be the leader. And with his passing, to put it lightly, she has now inherited this role that she
never thought she would.
Yeah, but as sacrifice, she knows, like, regardless of what role I have, this is what I have to deal with.
This is on my plate now.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a loss of comfort in that as well, and that she was happy knowing, well, not happy perhaps, but she was okay knowing she was going to leave her home and be queen of a different country, knowing that on one of her borders would be her brother, that one of her borders would be shared with somebody who she could trust, that she could deal honestly with. And now, with the loss of that, not only has she now got more place to be responsible for, she has to do that with the family of the people who arranged to have him killed. And that's a very different scenario than what she signed on for.
Yeah.
And she took it in stride, really. She's amazing.
Yeah.
But, and we see her take that on when she says to Fitz, as sacrifice, I can forgive you because I have to, really. I will not forget that you killed my brother. And the fact that their relationship evolves to the point that it does is, again, astonishing.
Yeah.
But it does, and it's perfectly natural, and it all makes sense. But if you take those two things separately and go, that's when they met, and this is where they are now, make them line up. You'd be like, huh? There's not. You'd be like, you can't connect those two things.
But the power of Robb and Hobb.
Exactly. So perhaps on that sentence, we will call this one a day. I'm going to stop recording. So thank you for joining us. And if you had fun, you are welcome to join us again. So hit like, hit subscribe, all the things. Visit Evie's channel, do the same. And we will see you next time. We're going to love you and leave you. Bye.